Doctor Strange goes through the trouble of learning the mystic arts and still uses his ability to annoy people as his primary weapon. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 14th film in the MCU, Marvel's 2016 sci-fi superhero film, Doctor Strange. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, ranked lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. Doctor Strange stars Benedict Cumberbatch, Tilda Swinton, and Mads Mikkelson, and was directed by Scott Derrickson. It tells the story of arrogant neurosurgeon, Stephen Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who learns the mystic arts and works to save the world from the dark dimension. Back when the MCU first began, I sort of knew what was going on. Even though I've never been a comic reader, I still knew who the big characters were. Maybe not the intricacies of their personalities and adventures, but I was familiar with the basics of Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and the Hulk. Marvel stuck with films focusing on these four characters for a remarkable 6 years and 9 movies, but it was only a matter of time before they had to shake things up a bit to keep fans interested. So, in 2014, halfway through Phase 2 of the MCU, they started bringing in slightly more obscure characters, at least from a non-comic reader perspective, for their own solo movies. At the time, I had no clue who the Guardians of the Galaxy or Ant-Man were, but both films were entertaining and funny and had likable characters, so they were easy to enjoy. But then Doctor Strange was released. He was another new-to-me character, but he was an unlikable character, and in a not particularly fun film. So, needless to say, I wasn't very impressed by that first viewing. Doctor Strange feels like a bit of an outlier in the MCU. It certainly felt that way at the time of its release, and it still does now to a certain extent. We've had a few more films dealing with the multiverse and magic since this one came out, but Doctor Strange still seems a little out there. It almost feels a bit experimental at times, or at least as experimental as you can get while staying within the confines of the MCU formula. It does some weird things, and there are some downright trippy sequences that we haven't seen replicated during any Doctor Strange appearance since. This film certainly mixes things up a bit, aesthetically leaning into its forget everything you think you know mantra. This kind of out there, outlier quality may be part of the film's appeal for some people, but I am not a big fan of it. This unique for the MCU stylistic approach really ties into another thing I don't particularly like: mystical Marvel. This is obviously more of a personal preference kind of thing, and I'm sure there are plenty of Marvel fans who disagree with me, but I don't find the mystical arts / magic side of the MCU to be very compelling. I know it's threaded through a lot of story arcs, and it's an integral part of Phase 3 and 4 of the MCU, but it's just kind of dull for me. Don't get me wrong, there are definitely some cool elements at play here. The sling rings, the general concept of the multiverse and harnessing its energy. The visual effects are also pretty outstanding with the Inception-like mirror dimension. But with all of the reality, physics, and time bending, things do start to feel a little tedious after a while, because it gives the impression that there aren't lasting consequences or non-magical impacts. So, as fun as some of those effects-intensive action scenes are, I personally prefer the sequences that are grounded by the real world, the ones that still connect Strange back to his old life. Speaking of Stephen Strange, he is quite unlikable. Smart, sarcastically funny, but so insufferably arrogant. That alone doesn't make him a bad character. From a personality standpoint, he's very reminiscent of Dr. Gregory House from House MD, but whereas I like House, I find that Strange frequently grates. Now, I get it. This is both an origin story and a redemption story. We're supposed to think that he's an insufferable jerk, at least at first. The problem is, we only see this jerk side before we're supposed to feel sorry for him, which makes it tough to care about him or root for him on his journey. He improves a little over the course of the film, but even after his redemption arc, I still like him a good deal less than most other heroes, or even anti-heroes. I've actually enjoyed Doctor Strange far more in his supporting roles in other MCU films, though I'm not quite sure if it's because he's matured and come into his own, or if it's just because I can only handle him in very small doses. I'm a big proponent of comic book origin stories. They always tend to be my favorites. Seriously, give me an origin story over a team-up movie any day. But with that said, Doctor Strange was the worst MCU origin story we had had since The Incredible Hulk. For all its stylistic attempts to be different and out there, it still manages to feel flat and a little hollow. The story and perceived character development are rushed. There's no real sense of time within the plot, which is quite ironic given the lead character's ability to literally control time. Doctor Strange is a competently made movie, and it's moderately entertaining, but it's not a film that I ever find myself willingly pulling off the shelf. Truthfully, it had been a number of years since I last watched this one. I thought that maybe my deepened appreciation for the character, thanks to other movies, or my acclimation to the more nonsensical, mystical elements of the MCU might help, but nope. This is still a tedious affair, and one of my least favorite MCU films. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro is definitely the visual effects. It's all green screen, and some of it is extremely reminiscent of Inception, but there's no denying that it looks cool. The world folding of the mirror dimension is pretty wild, and it's interesting to see characters have to contend with the shifting physics within that dimension. I do think the film leans on its effects as a bit of a crutch or a distraction from the less than stellar story, so there's a little bit of style over substance going on here, but that shouldn't be held against the effects themselves. On the con side, the biggest issue is mystical Marvel. Now, I know, I'm watching a movie about Doctor Strange and complaining about the focus on magic and mystical arts. There are obviously inherent things about this character, and should be in this movie as a result. But I don't like them, so they make it onto my cons list. There's absolutely some cool stuff related to the mystical arts here, but when you have characters that can bend physics, reality, and time to do basically whatever they want, it makes it hard to stay invested, because nothing really matters or has consequences. They can just invent some magical way to undo it all. It's cool, but it makes for a film that has essentially no stakes. The second con is how tedious this film is. Certainly a big contributing factor to this is encompassed by my first con. The physics and time-bending craziness of the mystical arts is definitely cool to watch, for a while. But when the fight and chase scenes linger in the mirror dimension for too long, they begin to lose their charm due to overcomplication and repetition. Like I said before, I know some people love these mystical, magical elements, and obviously won't find them tedious in the way that I do. But even beyond those things, this film is a little bit of a chore to watch. The story's rushed and more bland than a typical MCU adventure. The villain's underwhelming. The main character's difficult to like or even care about. And so it all combines to drag out this story that probably didn't really need its own standalone movie. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying Doctor Strange or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Doctor Strange 3 out of 5 paws, though I will say this is a fairly low 3 for me. It introduces a character that becomes very important in the MCU, and it has some cool visual effects and ideas, but it tells a bland, rushed origin story while diving headlong into the mystical side of Marvel. I would recommend Doctor Strange to fans of Doctor Strange, or those who like the mystical, magical side of superheroes. Now, obviously, most of the superpowers that Marvel characters have are a bit magical by our normal human standards, but with Doctor Strange, we're talking about actual spells and magic. So if you like that, then you'll probably enjoy this movie. But if you don't like your superheroes overly magical, then this'll probably be a tedious affair for you. If you liked Doctor Strange, I would recommend Avengers Endgame. Doctor Strange has been a supporting character in a number of MCU films now, so you could choose any of them really, but his powers are perhaps most vitally used in Endgame. If you liked the physics-defying nature of the mirror dimension, you should check out Inception. It's a complex film built upon layers of reality and dreams, but has some great mind-bending visual effects sequences that'll probably seem a bit familiar. And if you like the character of Stephen Strange, you might want to watch House MD. It's a TV show rather than a movie, and a medical drama at that, but the similarities between the characters of Strange and House are too numerous not to recommend it. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Doctor Strange? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite origin story film in the MCU? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe if you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.